Hello and welcome back to the Transfer Flow, and on today's episode we're talking Champions League semi-finals. Inter beat Barcelona, but where was the game won and how did Inter nearly throw it away? While over in the other game, PSG beat Arsenal after a very shaky beginning. How can they correct those mistakes ahead of the final? That's all on today's episode of the Transfer Flow. So we're back to discuss the second legs of the Champions League semi-finals, and once again I'm joined by Neel. How are you, Neel?
Yeah, I'm good. Look, last week I heard you were happier to have Hayden on than me. So,
Not Not what I said. I was happy for Hayden, and now I'm happy
sure,
for
sure,
you.
sure. Well, I mean, to be honest, I'm not as happy as last time. Because, last time we were talking about real football teams like Jurgården and Glimt. This time we're talking about, what is it? Paris Saint-Germain and International? Yeah.
But
It's not the
Barcelona.
same. Yeah, it's not the same. But, you got to do what you got to do. So here I
Well,
am.
we appreciate you making the effort to come to us today, live from Mission
The middle
Impossible:
of a
Ghost Protocol,
sandstorm.
running through the sandstorm like Tom Cruise. But if there is one game that you would run through a sandstorm for, I do think Inter Barcelona kind of is it, because after last week we have to start on this side of the draw because it's more exciting. And after last week we were like, this can't be topped. And I'm not sure if it was topped, but it was certainly matched up to by the second leg at the San Siro. Another classic. Inter end up 4-3 winners after extra time. And there were a lot of similarities. Once again, Inter take a 2-0 lead. To be honest, in the first half, they absolutely creamed Barca. Ends up at 3-3, but this time we get into extra time and Inter just felt like they had a little bit more to give. That said, the shape of the game felt slightly different. Like in the first leg, it felt like Inter were really getting caught offside a lot, and they got caught offside a lot in this game. But the aim was to kind of like beat the high line. And in this match, their first couple of goals at least do not arrive that way, right?
No, yeah, you're right. I mean, the first goal, of course, was a high turnover. It was kind of a chaotic situation, but like both wing backs are involved, and then Martinez finishes. But I think you're right as well about there being some differences in Inter's approach. I felt that too while watching. I think in the first leg they were. I mean, we should say like before the tie began, I think all of us were really expecting Inter to cause serious problems to Barca's high line just based on the way they play and build up. I think in the first leg it seemed, especially when they were ahead, like they were way too rushed. They weren't really sort of taking their time, making the right
Mm.
decisions, finding the right ball. They were just going fast forward too quickly, and then losing the ball, and then it was a mess for them. I did think at the start here that they showed more patience. They kind of worked the ball better, found some good spaces, and then played forward that way. So they did do a better job of that initially. But then I also felt like after going two up especially, and Barca pressing them more intensely, just committing more players forward, they again looked like really shaky. They seemed kind of spooked by that press again. And then yeah, like after they were two up again, they were going long pretty aimlessly from somewhere. Like they just pass the ball back and then goes to somewhere. Two Barca guys are chasing him down, so he just goes long and it goes to no one because he doesn't have time to like look for Thuram or look for anyone.
Mm.
So I think it did kind of get out of hand for them. Like I think they wanted to go into the game with maybe a bit more control, and they did at the start, right? Like I think it's fair to say that they grew more of a threat in the initial period. Like of course Barca also had something, but in the goal didn't come out of nowhere. They did drop back then. Barca had a few chances which they didn't take, but Inter again got their counters like later in the first half, and then got that second goal, and then yeah, like, I mean, so I was talking to a friend a couple of weeks back about the semi-finals, and I was telling him like Inter have a good chance, man, and he was like, "What are you on about?" So first like Inter got 2-0 up, and I'm thinking, should I text him? I'm like, nah, you never know where this will go. That might end badly. So then that was a good call. And now here they went 2-0 up. And I was like, should I text you again? I was like, nah, let's not do it. And that was a good call again. And yeah, I mean, I was this close, otherwise I wouldn't have heard the end of it.
The time to text him as well is not when Barcelona are down by goals, but when Barcelona are leading, right? Because
Yeah, exactly.
like Barcelona are totally fine chasing a lead. Like this is fine, but as we'll come on to later, they cannot manage a more favorable game state than that. You've made this point time and time again, but I completely agree with what you're saying about going back to front too quickly in the first leg. And we talked last week about how the ball would go to Thuram, and Thuram did a good job in hold-up play, but he would often have one passing option on, whereas here that 5-3-2 structure and Dumfries being a bit more aggressive in his positioning. It felt like when they won the ball back and they were pressing really hard, they had quick connections on. So that first goal, obviously, there were two runners ahead of Dimarco as soon as he wins it back. And Dimarco isn't trying to win it by himself. The second goal, there's a bit of a midfield breakdown. Because there are so many guys, you've got somebody facing play who receives the ball. And then there were four runners getting forward. Like that's the thing about that opportunity. So it just felt like you had a lot more combination play when they were able to get the ball back. And also, generally speaking, I think the pressing, like, look, this was 120 minutes, not 90, but but even if you take out those last, the extra
Extra
time,
time. Yeah.
you've still got about 1.5 times as many defensive actions in this game as in the first leg. And that obviously means like less settled possession, more turnovers, more opportunities for quick transitions. And it felt in this game like those kind of went the way of Inter rather than Barca. I guess because Barca are the settled possession side of these two teams.
Yeah, but at the same time, I'd also say like I was quite disappointed by Inter's game state and lead management because
Mm-hmm.
I mean I felt that they've been one of the best teams at that over the last, I mean, since like 2024, so over the last year and a half in Europe definitely. But yeah, this game, I mean both legs, right? They've thrown away 2 goal leads. They didn't show. I mean, obviously we've talked about how Serie A doesn't have so many high pressing teams, and it's much more sort of breaking down blocks, which you have to do as a sort of title chasing side like Inter. But Inter have shown that they're quite good generally at like baiting pressure and then playing around it and then transitioning and threatening. And in both legs, like when they went ahead, it just felt like they lost composure for whatever reason, and they weren't doing those kind of more basic things that they do well. I think Barcelona's counter press as well really got to them when they were up. So yeah, like their lead management wasn't really great,
Mm.
and yeah, like in some ways they did get away with one here because I mean like when the game was going on and when it was I think 2-0 or 2-1, I tweeted saying so basically that I've been very disappointed by Inter's lead management, and if they go out they only have themselves to blame because they got, I mean, going 2-0 up is the perfect situation for them. You can't ask for anything more. They got into that position, and then if you can't sort of convert, then that's only on you. Like no matter how good Barca are,
Mm.
you have to be able to see it out. So yeah, they did get away with one, big time, I think.
I think so as well. I was pretty disappointed by their level of defense in these couple of games, and especially like the two goals that make it level in this game. Like, of course, the difference maker in the tie, as we all expected, Eric Garcia coming off the bench. But that first goal, like there are like 7 guys in the box when that ball goes in, so they've got a ton of guys up there. But Garcia coming on goes forward a little bit. Yamal comes central, and then obviously they don't trust Dimarco at the moment to go a full 90, or at least they don't in a game of this pace. So then Dimarco comes off, and they bring on Augusto. And I like Augusto. I've been pleasantly surprised by him, like especially in the Champions League. But it just felt that having Yamal come into the center, suddenly they weren't tracking the runners properly from the right side. And that's how the first goal happens. Garcia's totally free, arriving late. It's how the second goal happens. Olmo is running from deep and gets that header. And it just felt like breaking that Dimarco Bastoni connection that had really kind of kept Yamal pretty quiet in the first half. That really unsettled them, and suddenly they were just kind of unable to get out and unable to pick up the runners.
Yeah, and there was also Gerard Martin turning into like a left-footed De Bruyne for 15 minutes
Oh yeah,
out
yeah.
of nowhere. So that was good. But no, I think I thought Bastoni did really well in the first half, especially because I think like Yamal did beat Dimarco a few times, but Bastoni came in with some big blocks and
Yeah.
tackles. But yeah,
Mkhitaryan
like
as well. Mkhitaryan was kind of backing them up on
he
that side. And
almost gave away a very bad penalty as well. But no, I think like Inter, one of the big reasons why I said they're so good at managing leads generally over the last year is because they can usually drop into a very solid block and see it out in these big games. But in both legs against Barca, we've seen a pretty clear weakness emerge, which is these crosses to the back post. As you said, that's how the second goal comes through, and even like the first goal, Garcia was at the far post. And for whatever reason, even though they get these big numbers in the box, they don't seem to get like the last person on the far post tracked very well. Now maybe that's like a wing back not defending so well thing because we know Dumfries isn't the best at tracking runners. Dimarco probably isn't as well. So maybe it's that, but yeah, I think that's a weakness we've seen, and that's something maybe teams will look to exploit. But also generally, like you said initially that in extra time it felt Inter maybe had a bit more and sort of got through that way, which is true. But like at 2-2, it looked like it was only going to be Barcelona who get the next goal. But Inter looked like they looked out of energy, and I mean I think that's a reflection of the recent weeks for them. Where I think last time I was on, we were talking about them potentially going for a treble. They've lost to Milan in the Coppa, suffered a couple of really damaging defeats in the league against Roma and Bologna, which have left them behind Napoli, and I think less than favorites for the title now. So they've had obviously a very congested fixture schedule, but
Yeah.
also these defeats. And yeah, they I mean again they also rotated like fully on the weekend against Elas Verona. It was like I think 10 different players. It was a totally
Mm.
different side. It's not a case of like these specific players playing 3 games in the last week, but I think it's just the accumulation of all the fixtures and all the big games over the last month where we saw like after what the 66th minute or the 60th minute when Olmo scored the second goal, it looked like it was only going to be Barca, and for a while it was, and of course they did score the third goal as well.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, maybe this is the cost of they've kept this group together for quite a long time. It is an aging group.
Okay, old.
Yeah, I mean, like Mkhitaryan's 36, Acerbi, who obviously scores like it really is an unbelievable goal. Like when you see that he's outside the frame of the goal and he manages to score it at the end,
Like
like 37-year-old Acerbi. But maybe this is the cost of having that older team. Like it costs you less in Serie A, which has always skewed older and continues to, though less than in the past. But over a whatever it is, like 210-minute fixture against
against
Barcelona.
Barca's kids.
Yeah, exactly. It's brutal stuff, and it did feel. I thought Çalhanoğlu in particular looked slower in these two legs than I'd really ever seen him. I thought he was not quite at the pace of it, and they obviously as well have had their injury issues. Like Martinez, they don't trust to go the full 90. Dimarco, they don't trust to go the full 90. They're obviously playing Bisek at right centre back, who again I think has been pretty good. But what I don't understand is how they then summoned the energy in the first half of extra time. Because in the first half of extra time, and again, we expect Barcelona to commit players to attack. So when I said before that there were 7 players in the box when Garcia scored, you kind of expect that, right? They're 2 down, they've got to get back in the match. But when Inter scored the 4th, they had 7 guys in the box. They outnumbered Barcelona in the box, which feels insane. But something you do have to give them credit for over these 2 fixtures is their sense for when they can go and when they need to drop back and conserve some energy. So maybe the fact that they kind of suffered quite a lot in the second half meant that they had this little bit of extra gas. And then having people like Fratesi is really helpful when it comes right down to it, I guess.
Yeah, you're right. And I think even when we look at the second half, like, so obviously after Garcia's goal, it was like panic stations for Inter. There was that insane Sommer save with like the
Yeah.
almost open goal thing, but then it didn't matter because they immediately equalized and they had more chances. But then I felt later in the half, actually, like Inter were sort of able to calm things down a little bit. They weren't like so open. They were kind of just getting back and sitting there and doing all right. I think one of the turning points there was the midfield substitution. 79th minute, Çalhanoğlu off for Fratesi, Mkhitaryan off for Zielinski. That kind of gave them some more energy in the middle to just to sort of be able to match Barca enough and sort of quieten things down a bit, which they did. But then obviously Rafinha scored, and then that Acerbi goal, and I guess obviously it helped to have that momentum pushing them into extra time.
Mm.
And yeah, that probably was. And again, on the flip side, with Barca getting surely deflated when they think that they've done what they need to do in this insane 2-leg match with Rafinha's late goal and then conceding and then having to go to extra time.
Mm.
Yeah, it was. And also Barca didn't use as many subs, right? Like I think one of the things Inzaghi does really well is substitutions.
Yeah.
He has this rule of like, if anyone gets a yellow card, they're off within 5 minutes, which I guess works. And I mean, you look at Barca's sub. So Araujo on for Martinez 76th minute. Araujo didn't have a good game at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I think it was also like, I know, people haven't been happy with his performances lately, but also he was playing at like left center back, which is quite unnatural for him when he usually plays even right back or right center back. And in fact, I was surprised they went Garcia ahead of Araujo at right back. Um, but then, like, Fermin Lopez for Dani Olmo made sense. Bring on Lewandowski in stoppage time. It felt like they thought, we have this in the bag. Let's just send him on and have him
Yeah.
enjoy the end of the game. And so he didn't look on it in extra time. That really, I think, hurt them. And then they only made a sub like 8 minutes into extra time. Hector Fort for Garcia, and then at halftime and extra time, they used their final two subs with Gavi and Pavik. And they had Gavi on the bench this whole time.
Yeah. That's
So
the craziest one in all
yeah,
of this.
like you need energy. He's your guy, and you leave him for the last 15 minutes. So I think, yes, subs wise, I think that was one of the I guess places where the game was decided.
Hmm. Yeah. And what do you think it is about about this Barcelona team that makes them unable to, I guess, to control the game? Like, what is it? Because I mean, here obviously there's a lot of talk about their youth, and I guess they maybe Pedri can do the kind of like the power stuff, obviously, but like
Yeah.
he's quite happy driving the game on. And I feel like sometimes you do just want that more conservative player in midfield who maybe they don't quite have right now. I don't know.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I saw this clip from Thierry Henry on CBS, like analyzing that last minute, or last minutes, and I mean, there was the chance, right? Lamine Yamal hitting the post, and then basically at the other end, Inter went ahead and scored. But in that sequence, Barca had a number of chances to take the ball wide and just try and slow things down, which they didn't do. They thought, they're open, let's go and attack. I mean, yeah, it's surely there's an element of the youthfulness of the players, but also it just seems like it's also probably some sort of an instruction from the coach, where, because you don't even see their intensity changing much, right? Like, they're always looking to get forward. They you don't see like their passing patterns change too much. You don't see
Mm,
them even like being more conservative with positioning of like a fullback or something. It's almost like they don't look at the score line, and they're just like, this is what we do, we're going to keep doing it, which, I mean, which is good in certain cases, but you sometimes do have to show the sense of like just seeing out a game. And you contrast that with Inter in extra time, where in the second half of extra time they went to a 5-4-1, which is something they very rarely do, but they sort of put these nine players back and just tried to shut up shop and did an okay job. I mean, obviously still had chances. Sommer made a few big saves, to keep them ahead. But yeah, I think the contrast there, it was quite clear to see between Barca in the last minutes of the game versus Inter second half of extra time. Showed you like one team which almost like week in week out sees out these games, and one team which just like is at 100, and that's the only way they know to
mm.
play.
It would be interesting to see. Obviously, we don't know if they'll be able to make any signings at all this summer, as currently they're trying to do
Nah, don't
financial
worry.
shenanigans.
They'll sell some more seats, or I don't know. They'll sell
Yeah,
their women's team. They'll do something.
they'll figure something out, but they need. But it feels like this is a profile they could add to their midfield, like more of a sitting player, more of a game controller, and also maybe looking at the fullback zones would be wise. Like I like the players they've got there, but I also
Like
I,
Eric Garcia starting right back
yeah.
in a Champions League semi-final.
But he's up against a team that's using like Darmian and stuff, so you're kind of like, well, I mean, what are we doing here, guys? It was look, these two games were absolutely incredible, and I think Barcelona could definitely have gone through. In the end, I'm quite happy that Inter did. Obviously, I guess partially because we've all been quite positive here at the Transfer Flow about Inter's chances, especially you. But I did really feel like they deserved it. I don't know. Maybe that's bullshit. But but it just, I was very pleased for them, and I was pleased for Simone Inzaghi. So shall we move on to the other fixture then? Because
Yes, equally entertaining, no doubt.
totally super fun. Like of the four games in these semi-finals, this was by far the lowest quality. It didn't match up to the first leg. It certainly didn't match up to either the Inter Barca games. That said, I mean, it's still pretty crazy. Like Arsenal come out of the blocks really fast. They get a bunch of chances early doors. Then PSG score. Then there's a penalty that's like given after like a really, really long delay. Also, when Arsenal were claiming that they should have had a penalty looked at, then the penalty's missed. Then PSG score another. Then Arsenal have a couple of huge chances. So I mean, it was pretty it was pretty interesting. And one interesting thing about it is that Arsenal outshot PSG 19-10. Expected goals was 3 to 1.7 in the Gunners' favour. And in fact, over the two legs, if you take out the chances that would have been pulled back for offside, it was about 4 to something like 2.5 on expected goals to Arsenal, which is quite impressive given, PSG's form, given Arsenal's lack of attacking depth. However, this doesn't quite feel representative of the two fixtures, right?
Nah, I mean, for one, with the XG, you always have to apply the game state tax,
Yeah.
and PSG being ahead the whole time almost. I mean, most of the two legs definitely is a factor. And yeah, I mean, even in this game, like I'd imagine most of Arsenal's XG came, 2.3 XG in the second half, and
Yeah.
that's pretty
Those two
much like,
Saka chances,
yeah,
that
the
was
two
pretty
Saka
big.
chances
Yeah.
are like 1.4 combined. So that's like half of it. But I guess like if we go back to the start, maybe like the theme of these semifinals was maybe like bad lead controlling. Inter
Mm.
messed up, Barca messed up, and PSG nearly messed up. Like they didn't do a good job at all. I don't know if this was a case of like Arsenal starting so fast and like coming in at their face so much that they got spooked and they were like, "Oh, what do we do here?" But like from the first goal kick they got, they went long, and like their attackers, they've got Desiree Doué, Bradley Barcola, Kvicha Kvaratskhelia. None of these guys are supposed to win headers. You could put two of them against any one Arsenal defender, even Miles Lewis Skelly maybe, and you back the Arsenal defender to win that duel.
Yeah.
So you're just giving the ball away. And two, they're dropping into a low block. I mean, we talked about that in the quarterfinal as well, where PSG aren't like they're not comfortable in a low block. They don't do that in Liga. Like compare it to Arsenal, who they go a goal up in the Premier League against whoever it is. Last 15 minutes, it's a low block. You're confident they're going to see it out. They do it most of the time. PSG don't do that, and they go into a low block here as well. Again, quite early, quite quickly, and yeah, I mean, I think this thing they did well was they dealt with Saka pretty well. Like Kvaratskhelia coming back to double on him, they really kept him quiet on the right. Even you look at the chances he got were all central, where he wasn't in around those guys. But on the
Mm-hmm.
right, I think they did well to keep him quiet. But I mean, yeah, like when they sink into that block, it's yeah, like they don't have the just the individual defenders, right, to completely lock things down. In fact, a lot of the chances they gave up were from those long throws, right?
Yes.
And yeah, that was I'm surprised it took Arsenal this long to add long throws to their repertoire,
I
because
know,
you'd
right? If
think
there's one team that should be like, all we do is long throws, like
exactly
it should
like,
be this Arsenal
it should
team.
be. But I mean, where PSG were having trouble there was the ball comes in, and they can still do something to that ball, but the second ball they were nowhere near because they had to put everyone back to ensure they like remotely deal with the first ball. So
Hmm.
then it bounces to an Arsenal player and they get a shot, and that's obviously the big Erdegaard chance was from that kind of a situation, and a couple others as well. So I think PSG were probably also caught out by that, didn't expect it, but yeah, like on the whole, you know, like again, same case with Inter. I think if PSG lost this, they'd only have themselves to blame, because they did it in the first leg. They got Arsenal to press, they found a way to play around it, and they created chances. But here they're like, nope, we just got to go long and pray we can defend. So that was a weird one. But yeah, I mean, I think ultimately Arsenal. I mean, they also had these like weird sloppy turnovers, right? I mean, that's where
The
the
Saliba one is horrific, but I
yeah
mean, like, but from that point of view, that's the one area where you can say, oh, well, maybe this is what the PSG plan was, right? Like they got a couple of breakaway chances. Doué had one, Barcola had one, and you
Hakimi
kind of
had
feel
one.
you kind of
I
feel
think
if
the
one of those
penalty
goes,
was from one. Yeah,
yeah, you think, oh, well, if one of these goes in, then like, that makes the difference. It's a pity in a way that the Ruiz goal does go in, because it kind of just put the tie, like the tie was over really at that point. But Party coming in and Dembele going out, this also made a bit of a difference, right? Because then you had Rice, and we've talked in the past about Morgan Rogers being so effective against PSG, and they really do, as much as we want to praise their midfield, and we should, they do struggle to contain that kind of powerful runner through the center of the park. And Rice was just like driving through in those early stages.
yeah. I mean, their midfielders look. They're guys who can. I mean, especially like Nevs, he's a guy who runs around a lot. makes a lot of tackles. I mean, they can pass a lot, obviously, Vitinha, Ruiz, all that. They can't really. I mean, look, like Neves, yeah, he works really hard. He's very tenacious. But a guy like Rice running past him, he's not gonna, match him in the aerial duel. Like it's not gonna happen. You can't expect it. So I think that this was, I mean, especially when we had the league phase game, Arsenal PSG, where the whole sort of discussion was like PSG getting completely out outmatched in midfield. Obviously this was much better than that, but still Arsenal have, like, they can beat PSG in midfield in most cases. They have more, certainly in terms of like dueling strength there. So yeah, I think it's something you come to expect, and again, that's another reason why just dropping into a low block and hoping you see it out is a very dangerous game to play. But yeah, like Arsenal, they again, I mean, we can obviously talk about the fact that they didn't have a striker, and you put Merino up top, and you know that never helps. Like you can create a lot, but you really don't finish as much. But yeah, like also PSG also, like when so they were going long from goal kicks, but like when they won the ball back and managed to go back, they were trying to play out short. But early on, they had a couple of pretty almost suicidal passes they made, where they tried to do the thing they did in the first leg, where they like
Yeah.
circulate and then like look for I mean, first leg was Dembele dropping into midfield, but here their fullbacks were playing like blind passes into the middle of the field,
Yeah.
and they lost the ball. And I think another one of the things, maybe not like the biggest issues, but one of the issues with Arsenal is, while they have a really really good press, like when they're on it can be one of the best and one of the toughest to play against.
Hmm.
They don't capitalize on high turnovers much. I think
Hmm.
I saw a stat in this game. They had 9 high turnovers, and only 2 of them led to shots. So, and again, this ties into all the stuff with strikers and blah blah. But it's been a general theme for them over the season, I'd say. So yeah, that was another like weird dynamic going on where PSG was like almost giving up chances. But yeah, it was not to be for Arsenal.
It just Arsenal do feel like quite often they don't really understand maintaining tempo in games like this. Like with the high turnover thing, you sometimes see this as well, where the person gets on the ball and it's like they're looking for the optimal thing to do
Yeah,
rather
like
than a thing that's
let's not lose the ball. It's
exactly.
not
And like
let's get a shot. Let's not lose the
yeah,
ball.
and sometimes in those positions you're like you might need to make like a good gamble is better than the perfect choice but too late. And it feels like this is something the same goes for their throws. Obviously in this game they're using the long throws, but I mean generally when the ball goes out, and you see this especially against smaller teams, teams that they should be expected to beat, they take forever. They take forever to
They're like,
do this
I'll
stuff.
pass to you,
And
but no, there's a guy next to you. I can't possibly go there. Well,
yeah,
I'm just gonna go back.
it's like, what is the point of building this team full of giants if you're like, well, I can't possibly throw the ball to one of these guys? Like, what's he going to do? And so, you always look at us. Teams want to, especially smaller teams or teams with leads, are quite happy to waste time against Arsenal. And Arsenal kind of
Arsenal help
play into,
them.
yeah, Arsenal
Yeah,
play into it by being like, oh, well, are we going to take this? And even at the end, like Thomas Partey is really huffing and puffing over to take these throws. And I was just like, let a guy who's like not as good at throwing take it 20 seconds faster. This is ridiculous stuff. So there's a load of this stuff with Arsenal where you think they're not particularly I don't even know how to describe it, but it's like they don't have a sense for a moment that they can capitalize on sometimes. Like you say, they get the high turnover and it's right, let's give the ball to Odegaard and he's going to kind of have a look around and think, what am I going to do? And probably like, think about the fact that he's been up twice in the night with his baby, all this kind of stuff. Like it's really frustrating to watch them at times. Plus, I think in these fixtures, and look, absolutely it's true. Like for Arsenal to get to the semi-finals of the Champions League with Marino playing centre forward is astonishing. Like it really is. And if they'd got to the final or won it, it would have been ludicrous. I do think that we have to, talk about that. But Arteta is so conservative with his substitutions. In this game, he brings on Calafiori in, I think, the 68th minute, which is already quite late. And he only brings him on because Lewis Skelly's been booked 10 minutes earlier. And then he brings on Trossard a bit later, but for Martinelli, like complete like-for-like change. And then his last attacking substitution, they need some goals. Ben White comes on in the 83rd minute. And you think, I completely agree with you. PSG kind of locked Saka out on the right wing. And he got way more dangerous when they gave him license to roam. He was getting into the centre, he was drifting over to the left, kind of like in the first leg. And as Ted has said again and again, what's great about Saka is he's got these range of skills and a very good match intelligence, and he's able to work out which of his abilities is going to be most profitable in a particular moment. It felt to me like this game was crying out for them to move Saka more central and bring on someone like Nwaneri, who actually is like very good at wriggling out of pressure and is willing to take a shot from a little bit of range. You know, there was one in the first half. I don't know if you recall this one, but Ødegaard like drifted through a couple of challenges and gets to the edge of the box. And I was like, he's going to shoot. And he delayed and delayed and he dummied and delayed and delayed. And then it just goes out wide. And I was like, okay, that's over. And Arsenal's ironically, for a team called Arsenal, their range of firepower, their range of weaponry does feel like it's quite limited at times. You know, like they don't want to take those shots from the top of the box and they don't want to go back to front really quickly and risk losing the ball. And it does make them predictable. You know, for all the expected goals they created in this game, like it does make them predictable. And that feels like something they absolutely need to work on this summer, certainly, but also on the training ground.
No, you're absolutely right, and like the shooting thing is especially true, and I think Ødegaard particularly is guilty of that a fair few times. But you know, like I was talking about this before we recorded, right? Like contrasting Arsenal and Barcelona, you see some two almost like opposite teams in many senses. Like I mean, for one, we talked about Barca being unable to keep a lead, and Arsenal do that a lot. But on the flip side, Barca have this ability to just keep going and keep pushing whenever they need a goal, and they definitely create a lot of chances, which, as you say, Arsenal don't really do. And if you compare the two games where both Arsenal and Barca are trailing against an opponent that's dropping into a low block, it's so interesting to see the difference of how it played out. I mean, if you look at the match momentum graphs, which I mean, I understand obviously, if you're listening and not watching, you won't be able to see them. But if you go up to like FOTMOB and look it up, for Barca in the second half, it is literally all Barca. Like it is massively all Barca throughout the second half, pretty much until they get that third goal. Arsenal PSG, again, Arsenal are what 2 goals down really on aggregate, and it's still going up and down. They're not sustaining like any long periods of threat even when they need this goal, and that's after that. Like they're so concerned about retaining possession. The least you can do then is like box PSG in, and try and get a mistake out of them. You know,
Yeah.
See if they mess up, but like it's weird where on one hand they're so concerned with retaining possession that they don't take some maybe more of like part shots, or they don't try and get into more chaotic situations, but two, they don't even build pressure with all that like retention. So it is like it's almost like Arsenal are wasting time against themselves when they're trailing. So yeah, that's definitely a situation they need to work on quite a bit. And yeah, I mean, again, part of it is maybe like having this slightly unidimensional attack with a lot of focus on Saka. But I mean, come on, it's not like they don't have other threat. Like
Sure.
Odegaard can do some things, Martinelli can do something. Hell, get a ball into the box on Merino's head, he might win the duel. He
Yeah.
might win the header. But if you don't even do that, like you don't have a chance. So yeah, it's definitely quite a weird thing, and that's probably where like they're lacking against all the other teams. Like we talk about who are the strongest or the favorites for the Champions League before the quarters and semis. I think this is the piece that Arsenal are missing, right? Is if they go 1 or 2 goals up, yeah, they can shut it up. But if they go down, yeah, then it's a longer road ahead. And when you play
Yeah.
teams of this like equal caliber, you are probably going to go down. One of your shots doesn't go in, one of their shots goes in. You've got to have a plan when you go down. So this is like the clear limiting factor of this team right now. And yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they I mean, are long throws the answer? Is that their wild card? Or do they have something more?
Yeah, I completely agree with it, with all of this. Like this is definitely something where Arteta, maybe after the attacking injuries, maybe he thought, all right, okay, well, if we do this, we're going to have to do it defensively. But it does seem like it's been a consistent theme across his time in charge. And the good thing from Arsenal's point of view, kind of like Barcelona, but with more money, like it's very clear what they need this summer. Arsenal do need some more central creativity. they could do with a left winger who can create a bit as well as just kind of run fast. They need a striker. Like there's a load of the stuff that they need.
I'd even argue, there's also maybe you could do with a defensive midfielder, because if you look at all the goals PSG scored, they're pretty much all from like the edge of the box slash inside the box, but like in
Hmm.
the central area, and it's all like defensive midfielder territory. Obviously, like the first, like Dembele is basically unmarked in like prime defensive midfielder territory. He just has the space to himself, and he gets that goal. And over here, the first goal obviously was from a free kick, but I think it was like Partey who dropped back to like contest the first ball, left Ruiz free, and then he scored. And then the second goal as well was Hakimi coming inside and into that region as well. So I think there's an argument to be made that they need a guy who's more like defensively secure and just can sort of put out those fires in the final third.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because yeah, like when you're sort of so focused on defensive solidity, it's a glaring weakness if you are giving up these chances in that zone.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. That's definitely something that I think they're going to look to correct this summer, and obviously that's something that we'll cover as well. Look, we were really fortunate, I think, in that these four teams in these semi-finals, like any one of them could reasonably have won the competition. But now we do have an Inter versus Paris Saint-Germain final. I said that I wasn't really going to ask you about it, but I do kind of want to ask you about it because I've got to say, when I was watching the Inter and Barca game on Tuesday night, I thought, if Arsenal go through against PSG, then they're a bit of a coin flip against either of these teams. They could win, they could lose. But I sort of thought, watching those games, I was like, if PSG go through, I think PSG might just beat both of these teams. Like that is how I started to feel. Or at least if Inter defend the way they did against Barcelona, I'm worried for PSG. On the other hand, Inter are very good at running their counters, but I just think that I'm quite taken in by PSG at this point. I think, despite how bad some of their play was in this second leg, it does feel like they're just that little bit more complete than Barca, and Barca ran into very, very close.
Yeah, I mean, like I think both teams that went through, their stock did go down in these semifinals. Like
Mm.
they disappointed us in some ways. But I mean, I still like. I mean, this has been my thing throughout the knockouts, where I'm like tempted to back Inter just because of
Hmm.
how flexible they can be, and that's. I mean, obviously it's more valuable across two legs than one, but yeah, like for one, I would think they don't have this level of a defensive issue against PSG if they go up and drop into a low block, because PSG aren't gonna cross as much depth, than like not gonna necessarily have, they're not gonna commit that much forward. Like they're gonna be a bit more measured than Barca. Um, and then there's also the case of them having their front two against PSG centre backs, who aren't necessarily the strongest in these kind of one-on-one duels, and especially like Marquinhos is someone you can even, like, you can drag him out, you can run around him, but I mean obviously he's the more experienced head. Pacho is someone you can probably just pull out of position and see what you can do with the space in behind. And yeah, like it's a very different challenge as well for their fullbacks, right? Because their fullbacks have been great in these knockouts against like the dribbly wingers, right? Like Nuno Mensch has done so well against Salah, against Saka, but now they're gonna get like these flying wingbacks going forward, and can Nuno Mensch beat Dumfries in an aerial duel at the far post? Now that's a difficult one. So it's like I do see reasons for Inter to be optimistic in both ways. But I mean, yeah, it's obviously very close. I think one of the main things is actually how Inter play out against PSG's press, because I mean there's been a lot of like praise for PSG's press this season. Obviously, it's miles better than what it was before, but I do think they are like kind of intensity merchants to some extent. They're just running at you, and I think people are like, what the hell's going on? PSG running at us, and they kind of get spooked. But I've noticed this throughout their games. Like as the game goes on, and obviously they lose some intensity with fatigue and all that. There are actually some gaps in their press,
Yeah.
and Inter are. I mean, again, they're generally well positioned to exploit them. Like they did really badly against Barca, who are also kind of similar in that they're just going to run at you, and then
Hmm.
I mean, they have insane highline as well. So like from that perspective, yeah, like if Inter do the same mistakes they did against Barca, then it's a problem. But I do think they have it in the locker to do better, to find a way against that press. If they manage it, then I would back them, like fairly strongly. Whereas like generally, it looks very even, but if they beat that press, I would really back them.
No, I do understand where you're coming from on that, and it's there were times, obviously, in these legs against PSG. I think especially in the first leg when they were kind of going man for man, and you had Lewis Skelly just dribble away from Hakimi, and suddenly
Yeah.
he was going through with like 3 passing options. Inter aren't really going to try and dribble out of the pressure; they're going to try and combine out of it, and I think that we saw some pretty, especially in the first leg, we saw some really panicky passing, even from Bastoni. So I don't really want to see that. But if Barella just has a really good day, or if these guys are able to play these quick touches
I
and get
mean,
around the midfield.
I should say, sorry to interrupt, I should say they did do a good job against Bayern, who are also very player oriented. They did fantastic against their press. So yeah, like it's difficult to put a finger on, but I think in that game what they did a lot was like Barella was dropping to center back, and he was like kind of playing those passes. Am I right in remembering Pavard was maybe fit for that game? So maybe it was.
Yeah, because he scored in one of them, right?
Yeah, yeah, right. He was.
He went
So
absolutely insane when he scored against his old club. It was great.
yeah, so I think maybe that was one of the issues possibly then against I mean, in this semi where Barella couldn't drop in because Bisek wasn't going to be so comfortable going wide or going up. So maybe that was one limiting factor. But yeah, like I think they have definitely shown they can do it. So it's just a question of if they will do it in the final.
I would look. I would be quite happy for either of these teams to win it. A big fan of Luis Enrique, and he does deserve credit for like just transforming this
Yeah.
team since the autumn. And Simone Inzaghi, like,
I mean,
I mean,
I think it would be a travesty if Inter go trophyless this season, like
I
after
agree.
everything. So
I agree. It's been pretty tremendous stuff. And look, we'll be back to talk about it when the final rolls around. I can't believe that I said, I think PSG might beat either of these sides, and then you talked for 2 minutes, and at the end of it, I was like, I think I'm back. I might be back on the Inter train. But this is all we
welcome
asked
back.
for in a final. After some of the finals we've had recently, especially last year, I feel like we deserve a more evenly matched, unpredictable contest. Neel, thank you so much for being here today. Where can people find you between now and the Champions League final?
Yep, you can head over to @ShaylatNeel on Twitter or Blue Sky, and yeah, you'll see my thoughts on these teams as well as a couple others.
Perfect. Thank you very much for listening or watching. We will be back next week. We're continuing our rebuilding series. We've got Tottenham up next, and all the teams we've talked about that need work done over this summer, we will probably get to at some stage. Please drop your thoughts on the match in the comments below. And if you're listening on a podcast app, leave us a 5-star review. Otherwise, we'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.